Welcome, welcome, welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Magazine Live, and happy Friday. Happy last day of Q3 of 2022. You have made it through 9 months of this year. I am your host Q, coming to you yet again from my mother's basement, and I am joined by my co-host P. How goes it, P?
It goes incredible. That song always gets me so hyped. It's like a generic like, but I can't help but just dance constantly, like while it's happening. I'm doing good. I just was fixing my shower with some Knocker Loose, which is a hilariously named product, and I wanted to show you all and share it with you so that you could also enjoy it.
Is that air in a can?
No, it's Knocker Loose.
And we, of course, are joined by the producer, the man behind the show, literally the guy who keeps the lights on, Mr. Chris.
Yeah, company man. Supporting the brands, supporting, the garb,
You statist chill.
I mean,
I'm keeping the lights on. I'm keeping the lights on here.
I'm drinking a beer.
We've sold pretty much almost everything except for our foreheads, which, by the way, if any sponsors are out there looking, P's forehead, as you can see beautifully under the brim of his beefsteak hat, is for sale.
That is a lie. We have sold nothing. There's no wall space here. This is all product that I carefully... No, my forehead is not for sale. My taint, though.
I think his forehead's for sale. Remember to like and subscribe. We're going to put a sticker up there, and it helps the channel out, keeps the lights on, keeps this show going. Really appreciate it.
Yep.
It's Friday, so you know how we do. We're just going to dive into some news and notes, and that's about it because it's Friday, and, we all got shit to do. It's starting. China says they are going to dump their dollars. What's going on? Xi Jinping and the Chinese banking policies have come out and said Xi Jinping has told the state banks to prepare for a massive dollar dump. They want to sell their dollars. They want to sell their dollar treasuries, dollar-denominated goods, and start buying yuans in an attempt to prop up their nation's currency after they have had the yuan has had its worst year since 1994. Looks like Xi Jinping heard about the dollar milkshake theory and does not want any of that dollar milkshake. I think this is going to be really, really interesting to see what effect this has on the yuan, what effect this has when the largest holder of U.S. debt decides to start selling that debt. This is not something that's like, insignificant. This is our largest debt holder saying, I don't want that debt anymore. Whether it's because they see weakness in our currency or it's because their currency is so weak that they are prioritizing strengthening their currency, that is kind of besides the point. The net effect of this is going to have a negative impact on a dollar that, while it looks to be strengthening based on the Dixie and other metrics, is just, in my opinion, and through a lot of facts that I don't have off the top of my head, but the dollar is weakening slower than all other currencies. We've had this discussion with people far smarter than me who have confirmed this. So those are my sources. But something like this will deplete and diminish the value of the dollar. And it could do so much more rapidly than the way the euro or the pound is depleting. My hopes of calling the Arsenal soccer team instead of the Arsenal football club, like those dreams may go away very quickly should China just decide to unload this debt. That joke that we sometimes used to say of, hey, we should all be learning Chinese. I don't know if actually, maybe it's just the circles I used to run in, but we used to joke and say like, we should all start learning Chinese because one day China is just going to own all of America. Well, it looks like they're selling off their shares of America right now.
So you're saying this is a great thing. China is basically saying, guys, we're selling America. We're decentralizing the debt that we currently own. I have two thoughts here, and I will not pretend to be an expert in this area, but I'm always curious what happens behind the scenes in these situations. So, the headline here is, Xi is officially, publicly telling banks, like, get your shit together, get ready. Chinese banks, right? But what happens behind the scenes? Has he already told, he must have already told the US like, yo, we're going to do this. This is about to happen. And then the US does all this stuff. They do all their posturing. Maybe not. Maybe it literally is the US finds out. I mean, obviously it's before we do in terms of the mainstream media, but I'm always very curious how all of the pieces fit together on the larger scale, separate from the narratives that we are fed as just, the dumb sheeple.
I candidly think, and by no means am I saying like this is what happened. Truthfully, maybe I've watched one too many movies, but what I genuinely think happened is slowly some of the US denominated debt that China holds started to get unloaded, and people in the US markets who trade in those bonds started to notice an uptick in those bonds entering the market, quickly started to surmise and recognize like, wait a minute, these types of bonds, this number of bonds reasonably make sense that it could be coming out of China, reaching out to people you do business with in China. Eventually you can kind of piece this story together. That's just speculation based on like zero sources, zero facts. I pulled that scenario out of my extensive years of research and knowledge of watching a lot of movies and reading scripts. That's where I got that idea from. But
he really just wants to know if there's like the banking cartel that sits down. The Rothschilds.
No, they're 100% the banking cartel. I'm just trying to
that exists. But what I genuinely think, P, to like go back to like the scenario you introduced, is like I think what I said is far more likely than Xi Jinping like calling up or whoever the Jerome Powell equivalent in China is to call up Jerome Powell or whoever in the US and like, hey, by the way, we're gonna do this. Like, no, I do not think that was a step taken here. Maybe I'm wrong though.
Bro, he doesn't use the phone. He shoots the arrow through the window and it has the note attached to it. Everybody knows that.
Right.
Yeah. I think this is an opportunity, if I may, to talk about the best and worst performing currencies in the last recent history. The period of time we're in. Chris, pull up the chart. So this represents the best and worst performing currencies, fiat currencies, in recent history. And I found this fascinating that the best spot returns are the Russian ruble and the Brazilian real and the Mexican peso. Like that blew my fucking mind. The worst ones did not surprise me at all. We've got the British pound and the Turkish lira highlighted here. But it's tough going out there. These mean streets are real mean.
And just quick clarifying point, those are the returns for 2022.
Thank you. I did not clarify. That's an important detail here.
Look, I just want to jump in really quick and say this. I've said this a lot on the show. There's one reason and one reason only that the ruble is having the year it's having. And that's because Vladimir Putin went ahead and said, okay, fine. You don't want to give us dollars for our oil. I'm only accepting rubles. And all of a sudden now you have a fiat currency backed by some tangible real world good. Almost like that's a good thing. Almost like that kind of might matter.
Well, it's not backed by it, but it is.
It's not, but like
it's kind of anchored to it or tied to it, and the demand for it shot up, which is of course their intention.
Yeah, and so, I mean, if you want to think about it, since 1971, the U.S. dollar has been the petrodollar, and now it's like the petro ruble is basically like the comparison that we have. So we basically have two fiat currencies that are backed by energy in theory. Yes, they can still print them and they can, debase it all they want, but they're only accepting, there's a US dollar that you have to buy oil with, or now you can buy it from Russia via rubles. So it's very, very interesting for sure.
I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on for a second.
Do
if YouTube takes our channel down, this statement I'm about to make next is why, but I need to keep aluminum foil here. Look, in 2001, Saddam Hussein introduced the petro-euro system and started accepting euros for the oil that Iraq was selling. Not long after that, we invaded the country. Vladimir Putin has introduced the petro-ruble system. There are discussions about a petro-yuan. There are discussions over a lot of non-petrodollar systems that are popping up. It does not surprise me that we are in the midst of this proxy war, which we will dive into far greater details towards the end of today's segment. Ultimately, I'm not surprised that we're seeing these acts of aggression from the United States, whether it's by actually invading a country in the way we did with Iraq, or by funding war efforts all the way across the world. Meanwhile, we deal with our own problems here domestically. We really want to protect the petrodollar because, as Vladimir Putin has shown, he has tested and proven this to be the case. The strength of your currency is only as strong as what the world accepts for it. And if the most valuable thing in the world right now today is oil and gas, heading into what could be a very cold winter in Europe, I actually only expect the ruble to become more powerful and continue to strengthen. Chris, are you
Yes.
alive?
Yeah.
I'm just reading this now. I also am recognizing that Hurricane Ian may or may not be like knocking on your door right now.
It is knocking on the door, but no, I think we're all good. But if I drop off, you guys keep the show going. The show must go on.
We will.
Cool.
We'll burn a candle, put it in the window, and think about you as we fall asleep tonight. It wasn't supposed to be weird, but it got weird. Anyway, I want to talk about the second part of the story, which is that if you held the equivalent of $1 million United States dollars, it's redundant, in a bank since 2015, you would have only 700K in US dollars. You'd have only 140K in Turkish lira. You'd have only 40K in Lebanese lira. If you held it in Argentine pesos, you'd have only 30K. And in Venezuelan bolivars, you'd have only $2. Now, if you had instead put that money, that $1 million USD, into Bitcoin, you would have a whopping $61 million.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And just want to add one little note. You'd still have 1 million US dollars, but purchasing power of US dollars.
Thank you.
Said 700K of US dollars. It'd still be
That
the 1
is-
million amount, but purchasing power is what it comes down to.
It's an extremely important detail, but I left it out, and I apologize for nothing. Your purchasing power would be significantly eroded. These stats and this data comes to us from Foundation Devices. They tweeted about this earlier. I want to give them props for presenting this in such a concise and effective way.
What would you buy with 700K? That's not Bitcoin.
Dog food.
Bitcoin
This
miners.
is a question to P, but
Bitcoin miners.
Chris, 700K, because you don't have $1 million anymore. It only has the purchasing power of 700K. You already fucked up in 2015, but you cannot buy Bitcoin.
I mean, I feel like Bitcoin miners is like the opt-out.
He already took that. P just bought all the Bitcoin miners. You don't have any
Fucking
Bitcoin
got you,
miners to
fam.
buy.
You can't take that. That's mine. That's my answer.
Can I buy politicians with that? Like, is that on the table?
We
No.
can talk about that.
Okay. So Chris buys the politicians.
Who you
to then
buying?
Shut down P's
Who you
Bitcoin
buying?
miners.
Oh, fuck you. This isn't competitive. This is not a zero-sum game. Well, Bitcoin
You bought
mining
all the
is
Bitcoin
truly
miners. You made it a zero-sum game.
I see what it is. I see you already got miners, and now you're zero-sum gaming my ass, and you're going to shut me down, keep you in profit. I won't forget this moment.
I broker a deal. I buy the politicians. I say there's an easy way and there's a hard way, P. You either start wiring Bitcoin to this address and things go the easy way. You don't. We shut your ass down with the politicians. I'm completely joking. That sounds like a very statist answer. I am not doing that.
The fact that you said that makes it super clear you are not joking, and you are a statist shill.
Throw it in the chats. Who do you think is most likely to be the mole at Bitcoin Magazine? We're convinced there's a Fed among us. We just don't
There
know who.
100% is. Are you kidding me?
So dude, to be honest, Chris, I love you. You are one of my closest friends at Bitcoin Magazine. You are so high up on that list. Sometimes I just worry about you.
It's working, boys. I've infiltrated. No. My thing. I go to the youngins. They infiltrate them from a young age. They've been feeding the statist propaganda. You hear me? All the interns and all the young guys. I'm looking at you guys.
No, I mean, you know how you can tell a Fed from a normal person, right? You pull down their lower lip and there's a barcode in UV. You have to scan it with the UV lamp. A Fed told me that, so I know it's true.
While we're talking about Feds and the fact that Chris is one, Chris, tell us about what the Federal Reserve is doing.
Of course, I have this story. So, guys, cat's out of the bag here. But the Federal Reserve announces a major pilot exercise for ESG social credit score system. So the Federal Reserve said on Thursday has taken a major step in the direction of facilitating an ESG compliant monetary network that effectively acts as a parallel system to that of the Chinese Communist Party's infamous social credit scoring system. So 6 of the nation's largest banks will participate in a pilot climate scenario analysis exercise designed to enhance the ability of supervisors and firms to measure and manage climate-related financial risks. So basically what they're saying is they're working with big banks to monitor the ability to comply with the ruling class's preferred enviro-statist technocratic tyranny. Yeah. So
Those are some big fucking words.
Yeah, dude. I'm calling them out.
Proud of you, Chris.
Thanks.
You're biting the hand that feeds you. That's a big move for you. Yeah, this is
What are
fucking
you guys'
bullshit.
thoughts on this? Yeah.
It's fucking bullshit. I feel like once you understand, once you start to grok Bitcoin, it's this like snowballing cascade, and you're like, oh my god, everything I was taught is a lie. And I feel like this is a huge part of that. I grew up in nature loving the Pacific Northwest, and I was like force fed this narrative for my entire young childhood, 300 years ago, of that, like, humans are the enemy and the planet is sinking into an abyss, and it's only by holding in your pee and never flushing the toilet can you save it. It was those 3 things.
Wait, you guys flush when you pee?
Yeah, we can talk about this later. But when you start to understand what's actually going on here, and the just complete and utter disconnect between, especially around environmental issues, the reality of the situation, the science behind the situation, and the way that it is portrayed in the media, it kind of breaks your brain. It still breaks my brain when I think about it. I harp on this all the time, but just the decommissioning of nuclear power plants around energy is fucking bonkers. And this is just a further permutation. It's going to get worse. We're going to see crazier and crazier shit as we go forward. Q, what do you think?
I do think there's a degree of, like, they are taking advantage of the emotional pull right now. And what am I talking about? Like, we're seeing all over the news, all this coverage about Hurricane Ian, this terrible Category 5 storm, and I'm gonna say the thing that everyone hates to say, but like, thoughts and prayers to anyone who has been genuinely affected by this, whose homes or anything has been destroyed. In the conversation that I've had with, my girlfriend's family who lives in Cape Coral, or friends I know who live in St. Petersburg, no damage to their homes. A lot of them stayed home. Like, it's not on the ground is not what it was depicted in the news. I have my own theories on like the type of stories the news is willing and comfortable telling us. They tend to fall under 4 categories. Chris, what are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse?
Oh man, I need to write these down. I forget. You got to list them again.
So
it's earth, fire, wind, air.
So it's some sort of disease going around, COVID, mad cow disease. Enter your favorite bullshit disease that has been in some sort of wild disease always going out, SARS, whatever. Some form of a natural disaster. Hurricanes, there's a hurricane season, guys. Like, there's fire season in Los Angeles. Like, there's always a natural disaster somewhere in the world. Men fighting other men, some sort of war going on. Unfortunately, we do live in a world and in a society where there's always bickering, fighting in groups or between different countries. We're bearing witness to literally World War III over in Russia and Ukraine. Again, we'll get into that in a moment. And the final thing is famine. And there's always some subset of the population of the world that is actually without food. And these are the 4 main news stories that the news will always cover, because it's trying to draw on that fear emotion in those who believe in the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and those who believe that the resurrection will happen. So what's happening right now is the federal government is taking advantage of this emotional drawstring where people are so afraid, both those who are affected in Florida and those who are nowhere near Florida, who are bearing witness to this situation. And they think, oh my God, like, the storms are getting worse. Like, yes, they want to help the environment. Cool. I sent this tweet out. I'm not going to pretend like I thought of this originally or I saw it. Like the All In podcast brought up a Dilbert comic strip that has now gotten Dilbert canceled. And I'm just going to, in the most audience, I know you've been begging for it. It is time now for a long awaited dramatic reading. So in this Dilbert cartoon, Dilbert says, our ESG score will drop if we open a new factory that adds CO2 to the atmosphere. But we can balance that out by adding more diversity to our board. So the cat goes, how much CO2 do you plan to add? And Dilbert's response, 1 non-binary board member's worth. And like, mind you, separate from the fact that now Dilbert has been canceled for this comic strip, like that is ESG in a nutshell. Okay, fine. We'll throw more CO2 into the environment. But hey, we hired a VP of diversity and inclusion. So our social score went up, but our environmental score might have down, but it kind of balanced out. Oh, and by the way, we put 2 more women on the board. So our governance also went up. So actually we're more ESG compliant, even though the actual thing we're talking about, harming the environment, has gotten worse. It's a farce. It's an absolute farce.
On this point, it was John Oliver, I believe, who just had a segment on how bullshit climate credits or carbon credits rather are, and YouTube fucking threw the disinformation tag on him. And again, I want to be clear, like climate change is a real thing. The question is how much of it is caused by humans and the activities that we engage in as humans and the specific activities that we try to penalize. We're going to talk about this in a second, but for example, there is a concerted effort to FUD, that is to say, to spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt around Bitcoin, even though it only takes up 0.1% of the energy usage in the world. But people are obsessed with this idea that we have to like shut it down. It's going to burn the environment. It's going to ruin everything. So these issues are some of them are real. It's just a question of the distortion of facts and reality that people are trying to perpetrate in order to push their own agendas. And that's really the fucked up thing here. To your point, Q, it's all just virtue signaling. It's all just how can we sell more shares in our company by latching on to the dominant, the zeitgeist of the time. And right now, environmental issues are one of those zeitgeists, and it's fucking crazy.
It's the I support the current thing meme. Like that's literally like they're making fun of companies that like change their banner to Ukraine or whatever month it is or
dude,
like,
the what was it, LGBTQ month in June where everyone has that
exactly.
logo.
Yeah, like that. That's a like.
But you don't want to make that logo for your Middle Eastern departments because you don't want to upset your business in the Middle East, right? BMW,
exactly.
right? Mercedes. Do you really believe in LGBTQ rights, or do you just believe in trying to milk some extra bucks?
Exactly. These are real issues. It's important that people feel supported and all that stuff, but companies just love to slap a rainbow flag on everything that they produce. They don't give a shit about anyone. They're doing it because they can sell more product. Who gives a shit if Listerine has a rainbow flag on it? They certainly don't. They just know that if they put that on their packaging during the Pride Month, they will sell, whatever it is, 20% more product. And so they're like, we're doing it. That's all it is.
Show me incentives, I'll show you the outcome.
That rainbow Listerine actually works wonders on my teeth. Just saying.
Yeah, it's just the same thing. It's exactly the same. Listerine.
On the topic of carbon credits, though, I want to talk first about just the fact that Elon Musk and Tesla literally built their whole business on carbon credits. So, just something to note. But on the note of Elon Musk as well, yesterday a whole flurry of text messages, which don't look like text messages, was officially released online. My understanding is these are the texts that were subpoenaed in the court case between Twitter and Elon over the impending potential sale purchase of Twitter. Some of them were hilarious, including one text from Elon Musk to Jack Dorsey, where he literally said, "You up." But Musk was inquiring about Twitter, and Jack was saying all the mistakes that were made along the way and how he would have done it differently if he could go back in time, and ultimately why he had to leave Twitter to work in the Bitcoin space. I also thought the Twitter exchange or the text exchange between the current CEO Pagrawal And then Elon Musk, where Elon essentially, like, the CEO is like, look, like, you tweeting these things isn't helpful. Like, it's making the business uncomfortable. I think this Ask Me Anything, like this conversation you're going to have with our employees will actually be helpful to move the ball forward. And Musk's response is honestly in like true Elon Musk fashion. He just dunks on the guy and says, what have you actually done this week? You know what? This is a waste of my time. I'm not joining the board. I'm just going to submit an offer to take Twitter private. Like, honestly, it's nice to see that the way Elon behaves on Twitter is just actually how he behaves, to a degree, at least privately. I think a little bit more brash and in your face. I don't really want to like harp on this Twitter Elon drama for too long. I will just say, like, I don't care if Elon owns it. Like, I'm sorry. Like, Twitter lost the plot years ago, somewhere along the way. It will be really interesting when Trump does officially get reinstated. Over under, guys, because, you know, resident bookie at Bitcoin Magazine here, over under 1 month until Trump gets banned again, or over under 5 posts before he has a warning label slapped on one of his posts.
Ooh, now
his
you think
first
about these
post.
odds. Yeah, I think his
His
first
first
odds
post is going to have a warning label slapped on it. It's going to be like, this is toxic for your brain. The state of California has identified that it causes cancer. And
you know, he's going to poke the fire and just tweet something about COVID. So they're definitely throwing that COVID misinformation label on there.
I mean, he's going to say something.
So you're both taking the under. So I got to move the line down. So, okay. So,
oh yeah, fuck. We didn't let you say the odds. God damn it.
No, it doesn't matter. I set the line. The line was at 5 for how many posts. So you're both taking the under there.
I think the over on him getting banned, though. I think they'll be a little bit more lenient.
I'm not going to lie to both of you. I don't know what any of these terms mean. I'm not a gambling man. I bet I go all in.
You don't know what like over under means?
I mean, I know what over under means, but what the fuck does it mean when you say you move the line?
That, like, I'm setting the line
betting
at
line.
like over under 5. Do you think it will take more or less than 5 posts before a warning label is slapped on Donald Trump's?
Wait, but are you saying I'm going to have to stand in line longer?
Yes. Like, I'm going to move the line down now and say, like, do you think within 2 posts, like, do his first 2 posts get slapped, or is it going to take more than 2 posts?
I don't care.
All right. Moving on. Let's talk CBDCs.
Oh shit, that's me. All right. My good people, friends, countrymen, Bitcoiners. We already talked about this. The concerted effort to FUD Bitcoin continues to progress. There was what appears to be an embargoed story that Level 39 tweeted about, incredible author for Bitcoin Magazine and many other places, essentially arguing that Bitcoin, I'm going to read some of the headlines. Bitcoin's climate impact greater than gold mining, study shows. The second one, Bitcoin's climate change damage is similar to beef and crude oil, new study shows. Bitcoin is bad for the planet as beef, it's getting worse. And Bitcoin's environmental damage is on par with beef, natural gas, and oil, study suggests. This is in Forbes, Newsweek, some other random, The Verge, and The Guardian. The point is, these news outlets are getting these stories from places like Associated Press, from other entities, and they are pushing these because it sells. They are able to sell against it to their advertisers. I hope that all of you already understand that whenever you see something in a mainstream media outlet or any media outlet, a lot of that is biased very heavily by how many viewers they can get. And that's just what's happening here. We're going to see, again, as I said earlier in the show, more and more and more of this. Soon enough, you're going to see stories. We're already seeing stories where it's like on the positive side, like studies show that eating insects and drinking insect milk will make you stronger, smarter, and also more sexually virile. There's going to be more and more stuff like that. When inflation started going up, we started to see stories like why inflation is good for you and your children. And you just need to deeply understand and internalize that the stuff you see in mainstream media is heavily biased and often garbage. Have different news sources. Don't even trust us. We're just people talking, and we have an agenda. We love Bitcoin. We want to bring Bitcoin to as many people as possible in as short a time period as possible. hold yourself accountable for never accepting your information from a single news source. Read all of them and understand that everyone has a bias. Mine is Bitcoin.
I just want to also reiterate and remind everyone, if you didn't have a chance to catch our conversation with Natalie Smolensky, where we really went down the rabbit hole on CBDCs, I highly, highly recommend that you add it to your weekend watch or listen list. If you aren't familiar with or really understand the nuances of the CBDC conversation, we had a much more philosophical than technical conversation with her. Worth your time.
Yep.
Chris, MicroStrategy is in the news today.
Yeah, so MicroStrategy is hiring a Bitcoin Lightning software engineer to build software as a service. Obviously, I guess MicroStrategy has been buying a ton of Bitcoin, as many people know. Michael Saylor stepping down as CEO and stepping up into the chairman of the board. But yeah, I think it looks like they're trying to convert their business. I know this was brought up on a podcast recently with Morgan Richard, Pierre Richard's wife. She is a CFA and a CFP. She was bringing up, she's like, no offense to MicroStrategy, but she's like, I really don't think they have the best business model. So like when Michael Saylor was buying into Bitcoin, I mean, obviously it was a play of like, hey, their balance sheet's shrinking, but or at least inflation was eating away at their balance sheet, or the 500 million that they had in cash on their balance sheet. But I wonder if he was looking at it like, we need to pivot into a new business out of fear of getting swallowed up by an Oracle or a Microsoft or any of these other big tech conglomerates. So I wonder if he's trying to compete in the Lightning and the Bitcoin space now by trying to convert, obviously he's been doing all the buying on MicroStrategy's balance sheet, but maybe converting away from a data company and trying to compete with, like I said, all those companies to now more of a Lightning infrastructure company. There are many companies in the Bitcoin space that already do this. There's Amboss, there is Voltage, and a bunch of other companies that help with the Lightning network and Lightning as a service. So obviously, this is the first one of a real big major company converting over versus a small. Typically, these are normally smaller startups that do these projects. So it's going to be interesting to see. I consider MicroStrategy definitely a big player in the space, and I guess they're coming to compete. So Bitcoin is a free and open source ecosystem, and highly competitive because of that. So very, very interesting. Any thoughts you guys got there?
I just one thing I want to add. I don't think this will be the last company that will start to expand into the Bitcoin space that has no relationship necessarily whatsoever. Eventually, every single company will have a department devoted to building out some form of technology or some way for them to interact with and generate revenue from the Bitcoin network itself. So this is only an inevitability for everyone else. Saylor just sees it before everyone, and he has for quite some time. Pete, we have an update on Tornado Cash stuff. Can you walk us through that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've been covering this story. Again, Tornado Cash is a Tornado is a privacy enhancing protocol for I shudder every time I say it, the Ethereum network. Now, we hate Ethereum for many reasons. It's a shitcoin, it's bullshit. However, the Tornado Cash protocol is well implemented and is an interesting one. Recently, the US government implemented sanctions against Tornado Cash, arguing all the usual bullshit that this is a tool that is used by ne'er-do-wells, by terrorists, by rapscallions, and thieves. Not true at all. It's used by people that are interested in enhancing their privacy, which is extremely difficult on a bullshit blockchain like Ethereum, even more so than on Bitcoin. However, when they sanctioned this, it had this incredible chilling effect on the ecosystem. And they also went after the open source developer who had created the protocol. So GitHub took down the repo. They closed down the accounts of the people that had created it. And the main developer, one of them was arrested in the Netherlands. Now, the GitHub recently reinstated the GitHub repo itself, after clarifications on what the sanctions meant. But Alexei Pertsev, the developer who was arrested in the Netherlands, his appeal to be released from jail was rejected. So not for doing anything wrong, not for participating in any illicit activities, simply for creating a tool that was open source and that other people had used. He was arrested and he, of course, repealed it. It was rejected. He is still in jail. He's been in jail for more than 7 weeks now. And it's totally fucked up. It is, again, the centralized banks and the governments that support them trying to stop people from being able to free themselves from this financial apartheid that they are desperately trying to lock us all into. And we need to continue to bring awareness to it and fight against it because it has far-reaching implications. And as we said a number of times in the show today, it's going to get more intense. Governments are fucking terrified of people being free and not being not being subjected to the financial slavery that they're trying to use to control all of us. That's what's going on here. We got to stay vigilant.
Thank you for walking us through that, P. I want to quickly remind everyone who is watching, we're not quite done yet. We have one big story that we're going to go over with you guys for a while. But if you are over on YouTube, please make sure you like down below and you subscribe to our channel if you are not already. Over on Rumble, make sure you Rumble, you're right there. Please make sure you are subscribed to our channel as well. And then, of course, Rumble, the plus sign right there. Please be sure to press that as well. We will drop some stats if we get to 100 over on YouTube and 50 over on Rumble. Sorry, Chris, I just made one work for you. But on to our final story of the day. World War III has escalated. There's no other way to really say this. I'm going to walk you through a timeline right now, in case you, like me, were surprised this morning to hear this news. But Vladimir Putin had called on and asked the leadership of Ukraine to stop military actions and return to the negotiation table. We are ready for talks. This is from Vladimir Putin. Zelensky's response was that Ukraine has submitted an application to join NATO. We are de facto allies already. De facto, we have already proven compatibility with alliance standards. Ukraine is applying to confirm and de jure by an expedited procedure. Vladimir Putin has long said during this process that any move by Ukraine or NATO to solidify that relationship, to bring in Ukraine to NATO, will be viewed as an act of aggression. And Putin's response was that he declared the annexation of 4 Ukrainian regions, to which Ukraine, the West, and NATO have all declared this annexation illegal. As well, the United States imposed further sanctions on Russia for the annexation of Ukraine. We do have a copy or a translated version of Vladimir Putin's speech from today, where he announced all of these moves after Ukraine's announcement of the expedited application into NATO. Look, this is a very scary time. We are not geopolitical experts by any stretch. We are simply armchair experts who spend a lot of time reading and discerning what does this mean, both on a macro sense as well as just financially, like what effect will this have? I first want to say our heart goes out to all the people both in Ukraine and Russia who are impacted and affected by this decision and the actions of their leaders, whether or not they support them. We have colleagues with the Bitcoin Magazine Ukraine office, and we hope they are kept safe during this trying time. I think ultimately what we're bearing witness to is Russia following through on the exact things they said they would do should the West and Ukraine take certain actions. So I can honestly say I'm not really surprised that Russia's response has been this. I'm, to a degree, almost grateful that it's not even more aggressive. It is not out of the realm of possibilities for Vladimir Putin and Russia to use tactical nukes as a part of their sort of defense and military actions. What does a tactical nuke really mean?
Whoa.
He's an armchair general up in here. No, keep going.
So I'm going to explain. There are 2 instances in history where a tactical nuke was formally used. Unfortunately, for all of the Americans, myself included, who are watching this, we are the guilty party in both of these instances. We used tactical nukes in World War II to bomb Hiroshima, as well as, oh my God,
Nagasaki.
thank you, Nagasaki. And then there was also tactical nukes used during the Cuban missile crisis. And in both of these instances, unfortunately, we were at the forefront of it, and we America have set a certain standard, unfortunately, to where Vladimir Putin cited the examples of Hiroshima and Nagasaki as these were American actions done once before in the midst of a war. We are bearing witness to and poking a bear that on multiple occasions has asked to return to the negotiation table. A story that got swept under the rug was apparently back in April. Boris Johnson was offered an opportunity to sit down with Vladimir Putin and put an end to the UK's energy crisis. But unfortunately, the West did not want Boris Johnson, Mr. Anti-Establishment, to go and sit down with Vladimir Putin and cut a deal. So what did Boris Johnson do? He listened to the fucking establishment that he swore off. They're all on the same team, you guys. That's the point I'm trying to make. I am not justifying any action that Vladimir Putin is making. I am simply saying we are provoking and repeatedly provoke this man to a point where you have to ask the question of, are we just trying to enter yet another war to enrich the likes of Northrop Grumman and whatever other Raytheon and other defense stocks that are in the pockets of all of these politicians who are going to make this decision on our behalf?
I think trying to like excuse any of this behavior is kind of the height of insanity. I don't disagree with the statements that you made overall, but I think this is all just posturing. Like, and I say this, this is a question for both of you. Like, I feel like the threat of like World War III, you can see my little, is just more fear mongering, right? We talked earlier about how people are fear mongering around the environment and using that as a way to attack Bitcoin. I feel like fear controls people extremely effectively. And I won't pretend to understand all the nuances or have a really strong opinion about it, but I just feel like this really just seems like another escalation of that, because when people are afraid, they will do whatever they're told. I'm not sure though. I mean, do you guys feel like there is actually a credible threat or risk of the use of tactical nukes, even separate from that? Like, you know, nukes are this kind of like this boogeyman, but like there are conventional explosives that will create destruction plumes that are larger than the bombs that were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Those exist today. So whether these are, you know, nuclear, which is this boogeyman for good reason, nuclear fallout is a real deal, or not, I just feel like this is a more fear mongering. What do you guys think? Am I wrong? Am I crazy?
I talked a lot, Chris. You can go.
I don't. I think there's definitely a level of fear mongering for sure. There's a great quote when I used to play Call of Duty back in the day, when I was in high school, and in one of the games when you die, there'd be quotes. No, but maybe, you know. But at least I remember this from 15 years ago when I was playing back in high school. When you would die in the game, there'd be quotes from like leaders or just quotes from anonymous people, and one of the quotes was, "Old men declare war so young men can go off to die." And I always thought that was like very profound. And obviously they're poking fun at politicians that are normally much, much older. And they're like, we want to go to war. And then, you know, who are the one that, you know, bears the brunt of all that is young men and women that ultimately go off and die in war. And it definitely seems that we've been in forever wars. You know, look at Iraq and Afghanistan. We were in it for 20 years. And now it seems like things are escalating up to go back to war again. Whether the U.S. gets involved directly is another story. But you know, it always seems like things are always escalating. And maybe to your point, P, that like, oh, that's the fear mongering and they're trying to get you to keep doing that. But definitely we've talked about incentives always. And when you think of like defense contractors, like nothing is better for business than when they are at war and they're developing new technologies to sell to other people. And I hate saying that, but that's true. And even like look at like as far back as World War II, like Henry Ford made a fuck ton of money from World War II by selling not only stuff to the US and the Allies, but selling German tanks and engines to like American engines to the Germans for their tanks. So, you know, I hate to say that like the crony capitalism seeps in that you can win. Like the bankers and the businessmen profit the most from war, not either nation or country. And I know that's just a long-winded response, but there are financial incentives to go to war or continue to keep the war going or to escalate the war to go further. That's just kind of my 2 cents. And, obviously my thoughts and prayers, like you mentioned, go out to both Ukraine and Russian citizens who are just the civilians that are being affected by this.
I don't know how many people actually watched the most recent Star Wars trilogy. And like it was garbage to begin with, but I want to point out something because it goes off of what Chris said. In episode 8, they go and visit this one planet and they're trying to essentially like buy certain weapons to go and attack the bad guys. And they come to realize that this arms dealer not only is selling weapons to them, but is also selling the weapons to the bad guy. And they're sort of questioning and pressing this guy, like for the sake of the galaxy, like you must stop. Like you can't also be selling what you sell to us to them because it just makes our fight against them more difficult. And the argument essentially rooted around if they're willing to pay money for this, like I'm not going to not sell it to them. I got to run a business. I got to feed my family. This is the casino planet for anyone who watched episode 8, Star Wars nerd. So, but that is literally meant to be America. That character is meant to be America on the global stage because we do that way more often than we want to admit. We do that so goddamn often, and it is laughable to say the least. I bring up all the time about how Bush Sr. was selling weapons of mass destruction to Saddam Hussein with Dick Cheney in his cabinet. And so that is during the Iran-Iraq war. And that is how and why they knew that there were weapons of mass destruction when they went and invaded Iraq, because they sold it to him over a decade earlier. And to boot, do not forget, in that same instance, in that same war, they were sending weapons down to Venezuela to then have them sell to Iran so that Iran and Iraq could continue their war. So the US loves to play this middleman. We see all the money that we send to Ukraine, and I would not put it past these fucking shady businessmen to be sending it through a different channel and get those same weapons over to Russia. I wouldn't put it past them for 1 second. To your point, P, I actually don't think enough people are framing the conversation around World War III. And I think our children, Chris and mine, in potentially 15, 20 years, yours in about two century or 1 millennia, whatever you decide to de-thaw for that chapter of your life, they will learn about this period of time. And when we are living in this present moment will be looked back on as part of the window of World War III. We have already begun, in my opinion. I frankly do not think World War III is going to be us versus them, the West against Russia, nation state versus nation state. I think what you are going to bear witness to is an uprising, and people are going to get really, really sick of decisions being made not in their own best interest by the people that they voted in to have their best interest in mind. And these people instead are prioritizing their donors. They're going to prioritize foreign aid. They're going to just continue to prioritize everyone but their own citizens and individual citizens. You're going to see more and more uprisings. That is what I believe World War III will really culminate and look like, where you will have Germany say, piss right off to the EU. And it won't be the German leadership that does it. It'll be the German citizens that call for that. Just like we're bearing witness to in Italy. And you're seeing the new Italian prime minister and the citizens call for and call out all the rest of the EU for their actions, the way they handle business. It is, in my opinion, World War III has begun. The one thing I want to bring up, and the reason why I bring up tactical nukes, and it is not out of the realm of possibility, is whether or not you agree or hate Vladimir Putin, like there is a wild card in this situation. This is not a rational person who wants to think through and say, well, for the sake of the future of myself, for the sake of humanity, I should do these things. Like, no, I do not think Vladimir Putin is thinking through things rationally. This is a man who has never lost anything in his life. He has remained in power for over 20 years. He is going to keep himself in power. And if the West takes more aggressive actions, something as simple as sending another $12 billion or $80 billion, however the fuck much we are sending to Ukraine, Vladimir Putin isn't sitting there and being like, whatever, they sent money. It's like, really? Like, they want to just keep doing this. Like, let's go. Like, I'll fight. So I think we think that Vladimir Putin is much more rational sometimes than we're giving him the credit for.
I think I don't know, but it feels like it's all just narrative spinning, man. I think somebody just put, I think it's all bullshit. I don't think we're going to see a kinetic war. I think this is an information war and a war that's being fought in our brains by the mind termites that are being put there by the powers that be.
One last question before we wrap up then. So P and Q, when do you think the information war officially started? I think we've been in an information war, and maybe that's World War III is really what it is. You know, World War IV is the kinetic war. World War III is really an information war. But like, if you had to say a date or a year, when do you think that started? I have my answer. I just want to hear yours first.
You want me to go first?
You go first.
P.
I was going to try to look up the specific date when it was approved by the United States government to engage in psychological operations on our own citizens. I think that
I think that was in 85.
No, it was earlier. It was way earlier. It was in the 80s.
It was Operation Mockingbird. I actually just looked this up like the other night.
There you go. Okay, so whenever it was, I think that was a major turning point. I think that at that point, at least officially, and I think it's much earlier than that, but I think officially at that point, it became the view kind of shifted that it wasn't us versus them in the sense of like citizens from other countries versus the United States citizens, and we have to protect the heartland and that kind of thing, which is bullshit for other reasons. I think it then shifted to like the enemies are everywhere. The enemies are our own people. We have to basically, perpetrate psyops on them in order to keep them in line and make sure that they have right think and toe the party line.
I kind of feel like the Cold War was an information war because there wasn't really like battles fought. So I kind of feel like that was our information war. And you were seeing, you're not agreeing with it, but there were no bombs dropped. There were no like true battles waged in the Cold War. It really was to a degree just, I mean, you lived through it. Like, tell us what actually it was like.
No, I mean, you are correct that the Cold War was not kinetic. I was wincing at the idea that there wasn't like physical things happening, right? We had the Cuban Missile Crisis, but you are correct. There weren't like actual guns being shot at citizens of either country. But that does not, but it was just as, if not more significant in terms of the effects that it had, the long-term implications of the things that were, the policies that were enacted, the amount of money that was spent. I mean, it might as well have been a hot war.
We are bearing witness to, we saw Sri Lanka and the uprisings there earlier this year. We've seen uprisings now in Iran. In this country, we've seen uprising from both the left and the right over the last 2 or 3 years. We see uprisings over in the UK over energy. We see uprisings by Eastern European citizens over their cost of energy. Like, I truly believe that this iteration of global issues will be more physical. I do believe that this will not actually stop in the digital realm, but I do think, unfortunately, I'm gonna sound terrible saying it. It's going to be a necessary cleanse, and we need to cleanse the leaders out of our system. Like I'll just fucking say it. Like, drain the swamp. Actually drain the swamp.
My Merkin hat on.
No. But here's the issue. Trump literally went in the swamp and like started swimming in it and was like, it's kind of warm. It's kind of nice in here. I like it. I'm gonna be a swamp person now. Like,
a swamp.
What the fuck does that even mean?
But like he just became one of the fucking people inside. Like
he always was, dude. He was always a lizard person.
I get it. I'm with you. But like the point I'm trying to make is like it's time to flush the fucking toilet.
All right, my friends.
Before we go,
you didn't get my answer.
Give
No,
us your
I
answer.
did.
My answer.
Oh. Everyone wait for Chris's answer now. Please.
Now I'm not going to
put
say
your cup of coffee down. No, put it down. Okay. Time to listen to Chris for his answer.
I mean, I think it really came about, and I know The Creature from Jekyll Island's a big book for this, but I really think when we went to switch over to central banking, that is ultimately when the information war became a thing. And what do I mean by that? I mean, we locked up our own citizens, Japanese American citizens, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, the 1985 Operation Mockingbird. I'd say, I'm very young, but by comparison, in 2016, when like Trump declared like his presidency, I really think it's like, oh, wait, this information war has been going on for a long time, but like this is, when there was so much media against him, and rightfully or wrongfully so. I just think it's ramped up since 2016 for sure with social media platforms. All right.
On that note, I want to remind everyone watching, if you are not in America and you are over in Europe, or even if you're in America and want to go over to Amsterdam, Bitcoin Amsterdam starts in less than 2 weeks. Lock in your tickets now using promo code BMLive. Get 10% off of that. You're not going to want to miss the biggest party in all of Europe. And of course, if you are not yet subscribed to The Print Magazine, be sure to lock in your subscription now. Use promo code BMLive to get 10% off. The Orange Party Edition is coming out, and you are not going to want to miss it. Between the op-ed from President Nayib Bukele from El Salvador and just the sultry picture of P&I in the one-page advertisement that we took out and literally gave up a month's salary to afford the advertisement in the print mag. If you don't like us, I highly recommend you should just buy it just so you can make fun of us, because I don't think we will ever recover from this advertisement. Like, truly.
Yeah, I had to, I mentioned it earlier, I had to sell advertising space in my taint in order to personally afford this. So,
A reminder that P's forehead is for sale. Mine is not. I have certain standards that I live by.
Lies. My friends, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, all that nonsense. We'll see you on Monday. Peace.